Hey everyone, we are super excited to be spreading awareness and destigmatizing mental health in the Black and Brown communities.
This podcast is a safe place for us to discuss our adversities and even our shortcomings. We all have a story.
Just remember, no matter what we go through, our story goes on. Hi. Welcome back. We are starting episode 3 for Our Story Goes On. And I hope everyone is having a great week. And so today we're going to be talking about how to forgive others. So forgiveness is a really important aspect, and I wanted to do a whole episode on it because I know that trying to forgive people is like a huge deal for a lot of people, obviously. So before we get into it, though, I'll do a little bit of a self check-in since I'm still by myself, which is totally okay. So I'm feeling pretty good today. I had a rough week, though. I'm not going to lie. This week was just a little bit more difficult, but I feel a little bit better today. You know, we're at the end of July at this point. So, you know, new month, which is also kind of crazy because I feel like July is just one of those longer months, but it's also my birthday month. So I don't know. It's kind of like short, but also long. You know, being a summer baby, I really enjoy being out. I mean, I really enjoy the summer, I meant. So it's like, you know, and I also love the fall, but the summer's just going by way too fast. So today I feel a little bit better than I did the rest of the week. And I spent some time with my cousins and my parents and my sisters yesterday in the city, which was so much fun. And that was really cool because my family and I are very close. And whenever we all get together, it kind of just like we kind of all feel that with each other, if that makes sense. We're all just very comfortable with each other. We laugh together, we talk, and it's just always so great. So I think that's probably what helped as well. And I wasn't going to go at first either because of some work things, but I was able to rearrange my schedule and go, which I was really happy about because I think family time is important. And I always told myself, well, I shouldn't say always, but I try to always be there with family when it's possible because you just really never know. So we were all together yesterday and that was a lot of fun. But yeah, so, and then tomorrow's the start of the new month. So I think for sure, just a little bit of a reset later will probably help as well. And yeah, I was also reorganizing my house before I came to the studio, which I'm so happy about because I got some new stuff and my husband was able to build a new TV stand. Well, I bought it from Amazon and he was able to put it together because it's not going to be me who does it. Like I'm so bad at putting things together, engineering anything. So, but that was what I did this morning and everything. So I am really happy about that. There's like something about like when you walk into your house and there's like this new thing and even as something as small as like a TV stand that I really wanted. I mean, our TV is mounted on the wall, but something just like, you know, below it, it just kind of really brings the room together. So I'm really psyched about that. It's the little things. It's the adult little things. So that's always good. But yeah, so other than that, everything is pretty good. And I did start a second job. I think it was 2 weeks ago. It was probably a couple of days after we recorded the first or second episode. And it's a fully remote job and it's still therapy, it's still counseling, so I'm still doing that. It's just fully remote and it's for a company that allows me to just do my own schedule, make my own hours, and it's very similar to my job that I have now except it's fully remote. And I just really needed a second job that would be able to provide that for me because prior to this I was working a second job, but I was going into people's homes for children and adolescents, and that was just a little bit different because it really took up a lot more of my time and gas. So I'm just happy with this job that I have now because it's just fully around my schedule. I could be at home, I could be in my office doing it. So it's super convenient. And I just have a specific financial goal in mind though. So it's certainly not going to be a permanent position or position I really see myself doing even for the next year. It's really just for a few months so I can save up enough money to just, pay off some debts. Student loans are real, and doesn't look like President Biden is going to forgive those loans for us college students. So that was a whole other monthly payment that I'll have to worry about come soon, because I think he said August, but I'm just praying to the gods that he'll forgive them or at least extend it again. So, but yeah, so other than that, like I said, everything is pretty good. And we still don't have Joe with us, but I believe she probably will be with us by the next episode or maybe the episode after that. Still up in the air. I don't want to guarantee anything, but she's working hard to get here. So that's what's important. All right. So let's get into today's topic, which is forgiveness. So, when I was first thinking about what to talk about today, I was actually thinking about self forgiveness. And then I was talking to my sister about it, and she's like, oh, well, why don't you do one on just forgiveness first, like forgiveness with other people? Because, I think that sometimes that's goes within forgiving other people, and we'll get into that in terms of the self-forgiveness, and we'll certainly get into all of that as well. But so forgiveness is letting go of feelings and emotions associated with what went wrong, and it's basically releasing anger and or resentment that you may have towards the offender, if you will, the individual that hurt you. And this is very difficult for a lot of people to do, especially depending on the situation or the incident. And that could be multiple things. Could just be, it doesn't have to necessarily be one incident that the person did to you. It could be multiple. And that is also difficult for people to come to terms with when they feel like, can I forgive this person or can I not? So, but the thing is that forgiveness is significant for your mental health because it actually allows you to move forward rather than staying in this state of anger or even trauma, depending again on the situation that happened. And the act of forgiveness has also been shown to increase your mood and decrease anxiety and depression. I think also most importantly though is that forgiveness is also this is a very important point. Forgiveness is not necessarily letting that other person off the hook, basically, or accept or condoning their behavior. That's really important. It's what it really is it's about accepting what happened and willing to move past it and move on with your life without ruminating about past events that can't be changed. So we all know that you can't change the past. And it's also, I mean, it's just about learning how to move past that and accepting what happened. And I think a lot of times when people hear the word acceptance, they think that it means that you are okaying what happened, you're totally fine with it. And that's just not the case. It just basically means that you are willing to accept what happened so that you can go ahead and move forward. It doesn't mean that you're condoning what actually happened. So, of course, like I keep saying, because I'm trying to preface this lightly because many people may be listening to this and think, oh, well, there's no way that I'm going to forgive someone who really put me through the ringer or who hurt me physically, sexually. But so with that being said, I'm saying it depends on what happened because people may feel more empowered to not forgive, and that is an individual choice. But I still believe that it's the healthiest choice for you to be able to forgive and move forward. And with the reminder that it's not condoning that person's behavior. So let's just put it that way. So, how does one forgive someone? So, forgiveness in general can be very challenging and can also take time, patience, and a lot of determination as well. And that's okay too, because I don't believe there's a right amount of time to forgive someone. I don't think there's a timeline. Like, you shouldn't be sitting there saying, okay, I have to forgive this person within a month, within 2 months, within 6 months, whatever. It's really based on your time. But of course, the longer that you do it, or the longer that you are not able to forgive a person, of course, it may affect your mental health even more. But again, it takes time and patience, because you have to first be able to feel like, hey, I want to be able to forgive this person to also help me out too. What also can be challenging about it too is that if you do decide to forgive an individual and they're not being sincere with you, or they haven't given you an apology, or they're not really showing you remorse, it could be even more challenging, because at times humans, we always want the other person to know what they did, right? Like that's a huge thing, because we talk about getting closure, or we talk about this person has to understand what they put me through. And so that could be really difficult, because then if they're not showing that, then it's more difficult to forgive that person, because because now you're focused more about like, no, I need them to understand what they did to me before I could even forgive them. But in a perfect world, that will happen every single time. But unfortunately, we don't live in a perfect world. So you have to also understand that that will come up, or shouldn't say will, it can come up in your journey of forgiving a person. It is really about accepting, again, going back to the word acceptance, but it is about accepting that, hey, you may not get that sincerity from the other person. And especially if you don't necessarily know that person, and that could be coming from people who have been traumatized by kind of like a stranger. If you don't know them, you're probably not going to get that feedback from them at all. So that's something to remember as well. So there is this model that was created by psychologist Robert Enright. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. So he basically presented 4 steps to help forgive a person. And I'm going to read each step off to you, and then, we'll talk a little bit about each one and everything. So the first step is uncovering your anger. So sometimes we hold our anger in, and it tends to explode when we're usually triggered by something. So explore how and why you covered that anger, and find ways to release it in more healthy ways. So again, uncovering that anger is important, because anger is usually the emotion that comes with not being able to forgive a person. I always say that anger is a secondary emotion. And I say that because anger doesn't ever usually come first when a situation happens. So it's usually like the underlying emotion to feeling sad, to feeling maybe frustrated or stressed. I really feel like anger is something that comes after the first emotion that you might be experiencing. So step number 2 is to make a conscious decision to forgive that person. Start to realize that ignoring or coping with this issue in an unhealthy way is not working for you anymore. So then you could maybe start to consider, I could try to forgive this other person, because coping with it in an unhealthy way is not working anymore, or ignoring it is also certainly not helping, because again, going back to step 1, if you ignore your feelings, it's going to come out eventually. It's going to explode, whether it's, you're doing that towards somebody else, or you're even doing it towards yourself, but it will come out either way. And that's really important to remember. So making a conscious decision to forgive is important, because you have to actually work towards doing that, and not just saying it like, oh, I'm going to forgive this person eventually. And of course, these steps are what you can start as soon as you make that decision. Like, okay, I think I'm ready to move on. Now let me do these steps. So the step number 3 is to cultivate forgiveness by developing compassion for that individual. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Like, how could you ever develop compassion for someone that hurt you? Like I said before, physically, or for those who have experienced sexual assault or sexual trauma, like you're probably thinking there's no way that I'm going to develop compassion for that other person. So I'm going to try to spin it in my own kind of way, which is kind of trying to understand why that person may have done that one specific thing or specific things. Because like I said before, it could be multiple. And make it really more about them and not you. So it's more about like reflecting if the act was done maliciously, or maybe something was going on in that person's life. Again, as I've been saying, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm condoning what they did, because there's certainly no excuse to hurt someone deliberately. But I feel like this kind of aspect is more for like the lesser things that you may want to forgive a person for. But if you look at it in a sense of how we usually take things on as humans, when things happen to us, we tend to internalize it. And we've talked about that a few times on previous episodes here, about how we tend to take on what other people do to us. We internalize it. We think if someone, I don't know, it's like, let's say that you're in a relationship and the person, I don't know, lied to you. Your partner lied to you about something, and then you realize that, okay, well, I'm really hurt by that person. And then you may start to think, well, is it something that I did? Why are they lying to me? Am I not good enough? And so that could also play a role in it. So it's really just about understanding that, try to maybe change your perspective a little bit. I think that's what the psychologist was trying to talk about as well. And just, hey, let's reflect on what that other person might, the reasoning or whatever behind it, and then, kind of go from there. And the last step is to release the harmful emotions and reflect on how you can grow from this. So, this relates a lot to what I was saying in step number 2, in terms of, or I'm sorry, no, step number 1 more, which would be uncovering your anger. So, you can release the harmful emotions by spending a few minutes to maybe even a few hours of just releasing these emotions that have come through this situation that you feel like you need to forgive the person for. You can do this through meditation. I know I talk about meditation a lot, but I really do feel that meditation is a very powerful tool to be able to start this for yourself. If you're releasing these emotions through meditation, can be so beneficial because you're doing it in a calm way, you're doing it in what could be a guided way, and then kind of going from there. You can do that through praying, right? A lot of people do depend on their faith for certain things, or their spirituality for certain aspects in their life. And praying could be helpful, right? And you can either talk out loud and pray that this is what I need for my life right now. I need to be able to forgive. I need to be able to have that guidance, all of that. So praying could be one part of it as well. You could do physical activity through releasing these emotions. So maybe you want to take a walk while you're releasing these emotions, or maybe a run. Maybe you want to do even more strenuous exercise than that. Maybe you want to go a little bit harder in terms of, I don't know, maybe doing like a lot of jumping jacks and push-ups or something that you feel like, okay, I'm going to get my blood pumping to be able to release these emotions. Another way that you can release emotions is, I know this is going to sound silly, but screaming. Like sometimes just like screaming everything out feels good. But again, you're doing it in a way that you know you're releasing, and you're not going to come back to that all the time. It's like, I'm releasing these emotions. Writing also can be very helpful. You're writing out everything that you're feeling, everything that you're thinking, everything in terms of how you feel like this person may have affected you, and you're no longer going to allow them to have that power over you anymore. So this all these things are basically ways to teach you how to be present in the moment, to be able to release the negative and harmful emotions that could have come with harboring this anger or resentment towards another person. So like, I've done activities in work before. I work with children and adolescents, and I've worked with many children and adolescents who have gone through traumatic experiences. And when you're working with a child, they're not like an adult. They're not going to sit across from me and talk about what happened. I mean, sometimes that's even more difficult for adults to do. Like, it's difficult for a grown person to come in and admit that, hey, I'm hurting, or I need help. It's hard. So now children, you may think, well, children are maybe a little bit easier because they're more open books. They're more open and to the opportunity to maybe talk about what they're going through. Yes, but they also don't have the capacity to just sit there and say like, hey, this is what I went through and this is how I'm feeling. So trauma work really starts with understanding, if they even understand what emotions are, for example, or if they understand that what they went through was wrong, or what they went through was difficult. And so once we get on into all like the nitty gritty and stuff like that, I have done an activity with a few of them once where I allow them to either write or draw what they're going through, and have them like literally crumple it up if they want to, rip it up, and like literally throw it away, because it's releasing that emotion that they're drawing out these things, they're writing out these things, and now they can physically and visually see that it's no longer in them, because they're throwing it out, they're ripping it up, and that actually they've reported like that made them feel good. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say like that's a permanent solution, of course, but it at least allows them like, hey, I am able to write this out, I am able to draw this out, and just release it. And if they have to do that every day, then that's okay too. But I think it just allows them to feel that they've actually released it, and that's I think pretty important. So those are just a few tips or steps on how to begin to forgive someone else. And I also want to make sure that you guys understand that forgiveness doesn't necessarily mean reconciling with someone else either. So, there are many people who are in relationships, who are in friendships, that feel they need to forgive someone in order to move on in their relationship, right? But then on the other hand, there are people who are no longer in friendships or relationships or partnerships with that other individual at all, and they still feel that they need to forgive them. But it just does not mean that forgiveness equals, right? Forgiveness equals coming back with that person, whether it's a friend, whether it's a partner. That doesn't necessarily mean that, because like I've said, at the end of the day, forgiveness is for you. It's not for that other person. And I say this a lot because that other person may be living their life thinking that they did nothing wrong. And now you're the one who's suffering because you're getting anxiety about it. You're feeling angry about it. You're losing sleep over it. While that other person might just be living their life, not even realizing what they did. So that's why I always say forgiveness starts with you, because you're the one experiencing it, not necessarily that other person. So lastly, one other tip that I also want to add is, and I mentioned this in the beginning of the episode, was forgiving yourself through this time. A lot of times when we go through something with another individual, like I said before, we tend to blame ourselves. We tend to think that they could have avoided it. We may also think negative thoughts about ourselves, like, how can I be so stupid? Why did I let this happen again? Because we've all been there where we have maybe forgiven someone for something and they do it again. But it's really important to practice self-forgiveness within that, because blaming yourself, critiquing yourself literally does nothing. And keep telling yourself that it does nothing, because you cannot change what has already happened. So if you need to, with those 4 steps that we talked about, now cultivate it where you can do that within yourself as well too, right? Because forgiveness and self-forgiveness kind of go hand in hand at times. So try to remember that as well. Like, self-forgiveness is really important when you're trying to also forgive somebody else. And I feel like for me personally, I've never actually like consciously made the decision to forgive, not in like in the sense of like saying out loud, I'm going to forgive this person. I think it just happens and that happens sometimes too. But I think like these kind of situations where you feel like it's really eating you up, or you're realizing that you have a lot of anger towards that person, this is the time for you to be able to hopefully do those steps that we talked about. Because at the end of the day, that's really important. But I feel like for me, time has really helped me forgive people, and sometimes for me, maybe cutting somebody out of my life is my form of forgiveness. And in a sense where it's like, hey, I wish you all the best, but you are no longer benefiting my mental health. And so that's a way of forgiveness as well too. But everybody is different. Everyone has their own experiences. And I just know that forgiving a person is just more healthy for you than it is to harbor that anger and all of that too. So yeah, I mean, I hope that you guys are able to take something from this today. I really hope that it resonates with some people, because I know this is a really difficult thing for people to do. And not all people, but for a lot, in terms of like, how can I forgive this one person that has really done me wrong? And it's just about trying your very best to take those steps if you feel it to be necessary, of course, too. So we're going to end with that on today, but I'm going to end with an affirmation because I forgot the last two episodes to give you guys an affirmation, and that's like the core of Our Story Goes On. So the affirmation that I have today is, I let go of the past so that I may go forward. So I hope that relates to some of you. And I hope everyone has a great rest of their week and good start of the month of August, because by the time you guys listen to this, it'll be a couple of days into August. So make the best of the last month of summer. And yeah, I wish you guys peace and love. Thank you.